Good evening, my name is Mary Maslowski. I'm the chairperson of the Historic District and Historical Commission. We are opening our meeting for Wednesday, April 20th, 2022. It's 6 p.m. here in the small meeting room at Town Hall, 732 Main Street in Harwich Center. Under Mass law, if anybody is intending to record, video or audio record this meeting, you're asked to inform the chair at this time. Hearing none, we'll start with a roll call. Mr. Doan.
Robert Doan here.
Brendan Lowney.
Lynn Zalisak.
Julie Aldridge.
All right, our first item on our agenda is public hearing for HH 2022-4. Catherine Zulig, owner, has filed a notice of intent for a partial demolition of a building at 100 years or older. The subject property is 708 Main Street, map 41, parcel B5, located in the Harwich Center Historic District. The applicant has also concurrently filed an application for a certificate of appropriateness to alter a building or structure in the Harwich Center Historic District. The subject property again is 708 Main Street, map 41, parcel B5. Is anyone here for the applicant?
I'm the owner. I'm waiting for my attorney still, crowell, who represents me.
Okay. All right, so we will, I'll take a motion to continue for, let's say 15 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
So we've got a motion and a second to continue for 15 minutes, so we will not reconvene this public hearing until 6:18. So that being said, is there anyone here for the next public hearing, which is Chelsea Nicholas, owner applicant?
There was a letter, an email in there that I forwarded. She is not able to attend. I believe that she had a personal function today.
All right.
And she's asking that you read those emails and make a decision based on documentation she's provided.
So, then I will open the public hearing for HH 2022-5. Chelsea Nicholas is the owner applicant, has filed a notice of intent for partial demolition of a single-family residence for the removal of 3 chimneys. The home is over 100 years old, according to the town's historic property inventory list. The subject property is 115 Route 28, map 10, parcel W7-1. Looks like the email, are you referring to the email dated April 4th?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll read into the record an email from Chelsea Nicholas to Patty McCura, who is our board secretary. The letter is for the Historic Commission. It says, "Hi Patty, I hope you had a great weekend. Please see the attached letter to accompany the notice of intent. As I mentioned, we will be out of town." The letter goes on to address the commission. It says, "Notice regarding notice of intent for 115 Route 28 West Harwich." It says, "Dear Historic Commission Board, as part of our effort to restore our house, we are requesting permission to remove the 3 chimneys and replace portions visible from the exterior with faux chimney caps. The front 2 chimneys need to be taken down because in addition to being cobbled at a steep angle, the bricks are spalling and the mortar is crumbling, which makes both chimneys a significant fall risk. 2 local chimney sweep companies confirmed these issues for the mortar and bricks. The rear chimney is both not original to the house and was built in an awkward location that partially blocks the rear kitchen door. We have included images of this for your reference. The front 2 chimney caps also are not original, so we intend to build the new caps in a more historically accurate style, using a contemporary of our house as an example, specifically the house known as the Columns in West Dennis. This home has an extremely similar design and date of build, indicating it likely had the same architect and is one of the few other examples of this architectural style on the Cape. Please refer to the images attached to our notice of intent. We will reclaim as many of the bricks as we can to be used for walkways around the house as part of our landscaping plan. Thank you for your consideration. We are available via email or phone to answer any questions or concerns. Chelsea and Jason. So with no one here, I will start with Bob Doan. Do you have any
Sure.
comments, please?
Yeah, I'm a little unclear what they mean by replacement caps.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you, there's no picture of it or anything?
There
so-
wasn't, that was one of the questions I had. I was gonna be interested to see what they were gonna actually
Right.
do there.
Right, because the.
Correct.
You know, it is on these historical houses, the chimneys are a very integral part, particularly the front ones, because most certainly those were probably original. The back one, I'm not sure, have to really look a little closer on that one. But, you know, ideally, we would want those preserved, but I'd certainly consider something if it looked the same.
Exactly.
Because, you know, our reach is basically just to, all we can do is postpone it for a year, tearing them down. But that's kind of my comments.
All right. Brendan,
Yeah, I concur with Bob. It would be nice to see exactly what they're thinking of doing
Right.
there and, you know, how it was gonna be done. I've actually been in that house recently, before it was sold. So, but yeah, it'd be nice to see, you know, what they were looking to do there. So could we postpone this for them?
so we have options. We can continue to a date certain.
Yeah,
We can vote the delay,
all right, right.
and
That's
then they would have to come back to us with a request to remove it. You know, I just want to see if any other board members have questions, or Julie?
Well, it looks like they wanted to do them like the column.
But I don't know, are those fake? I don't know if they, I don't quite
Oh,
understand.
I understood it as they wanted to replace the ones they have with the ones like the columns
That's correct.
building in Dennis.
And, but are those, the columns, I can't tell from the photo if those are original or are they
Oh, That's what you're
reproductions.
saying.
So I- again,
From my understanding, from what she explained to me, not to interrupt
But-
the
Yeah, no.
meeting,
But Patty,
Is that-
Patty, I don't want you to be testifying as to material facts for the
Okay.
board, so,
Okay,
unless
nope,
that really should be, the information coming directly from them.
do you want me to call it?
It's kind of unusual for
The email
us.
said they're available via phone, would you like me to get them on the cell phone? Or would you continue?
I would continue because
I
I
would-
want to see pictures and.
Yeah, they're not gonna be able to provide that tonight. I think pictures, the material that's gonna be used,
Right,
because they're looking to take out the chimneys
Right.
all the way down.
right.
And how do you put that on a roof and support it and what it's gonna look like? So there's gonna be,
What the construction's gonna be.
right, it's a good, it's not just an easy,
Right.
it's not like you put a cupola up there and just walk away. I
Right.
think it's a little bit more than that.
So-
I'm sure they have a plan, it would just be nice to see it, yeah.
Is the pleasure of the board to continue to a date and time certain?
Yes.
Yes.
Do we want to hear any public comment first?
I will, but
Okay.
I also just want people to kind of think of whether we do a special meeting. I think we have other reasons that we could entertain a special meeting in a couple of weeks. So I'll say that. Is there anybody here for the public that wished to comment or anything on this matter? Okay. Then if I can ask, town meeting date is May what?
Second?
Second?
Okay. So I don't think we should do it that week because we very easily could have town meeting on Wednesday night. I would suggest
Second,
sometime the week of the 9th.
I know
the 11th?
11th I'm free.
Is everybody else free? Keeping in mind, we would also be meeting on the 18th, so it's just a week earlier. All right, then the chair would entertain a motion to continue HH 2022-5 to Wednesday, May 11th, no earlier than 6 p.m.
I'm-
we move HH.
You can just say so moved.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
So all those in favor?
Aye.
Any in opposition? Hearing none, motion carries.
So are we actually gonna move the 18th to the 11th? Can we do
Um,
that
We can talk about that, yeah.
at the end?
Yeah, we
Okay,
can
that
talk
would
about
be,
that if,
I would like to talk about that.
all right. It's gonna depend on whether anything's advertised for the 18th already.
Yeah.
Okay, so we still haven't seen Mr. Crowell yet? All right. Then we will go on to the proposed amendments for Chapter 131 of the Historic, the Harwich Code, the Historic Preservation Bylaw. Mr. Eidman, thank you for joining us again this evening.
Apologize, I'm a little under the weather tonight, so it'll probably,
Been there.
since the last time we met, which seemed like eons ago, I made some of the changes we discussed. I've shared this with you. Certainly, I think all the changes are consistent with our discussion. You should have a clean copy, and on page 2, in yellow highlight, I'll go over the changes made subsequent to our last meeting. Under 131.5, public hearing, I changed that date to 60 days rather than 45. 45 is what is in the current bylaw. That's problematic because it doesn't necessarily align with when you actually meet.
Right.
So one of the reasons you're actually talking about a special meeting is for that very reason. 60 days also aligns with the Article 1 Certificate of Appropriateness process. As we discussed the last time, that's what the State Act allows. We're talking about moving the action, the time period to take action under certificates to 60 days, rather than the 30 days, which is current. The other thing I added here, quote, and make a determination on the notice of intent application, is because under the current bylaw, there's only a time in which the hearing has to be held. But strangely, there's no representation about when you actually have to make your decision.
Oh.
So I added that language in, both, I think, in fairness to an applicant and fairness to the board. So it would be 60 days to hold the hearing and then actually to make the determination of the notice of intent application. And then under section C, just added a note here that, which we discussed the last time, buildings included on the town's inventory of significant buildings maintained by the commission shall be presumed to be historically significant for purposes of this article. So that is to say that it's a rebuttable presumption. So if you have it on your inventory, presumably you thought more than just the 100 years, and there are cultural or architectural reasons to include it on that list. Now, coming in the door, you'll treat those as presumptively significant, and someone can come in and make the case for information you don't have. Perhaps the property was remodeled without that being recognized in public records or some other reason. So again, that's a presumption, but that's of course why you hold the hearings too, to discuss the significance and talk through the presumption. Under 131.6, you'll see the highlighted 14 days. Right now it's 7. Doesn't make a lot of sense. There's not much you can do in 7 days. 14 also aligns with other land use regulations as well, so that's 14. 131.7, again, changing it from 7 to 14. And 18 months I just highlighted because that was a point of some discussion at the last meeting.
Right.
I think the next changes were on page 4. And it actually just deals with delegation of authority. The authority that is delegated, this clear here, is under Article 2. So delegating authority, they delegate authority to make determinations of historical significance, because that's where the determination is made, under Article 2. Or determinations about the applicability of this chapter, so that would be Article 1 or Article 2. So essentially, the building commissioner would have some jurisdiction to determine whether there is jurisdiction under 1 or 2. That's, I think, consistent with what we discussed last time as well. And I think the crux of the changes in what we discussed last time we met was this definition of demolition. And of course, there isn't a definition of demolition today. We went back and forth about, how total or substantial destruction should be defined, which is part and parcel of the demolition definition. And we hit on this idea of, well, it should be, 50% or more. Some bylaws have actually more than that, but 50% seem to be, going any lower than that, really, you're in design review at that point. You're not really looking at something for purposes of demolition delay. So that, I think, captured some of the comments that we made. Total or substantial destruction shall mean pulling down, destroying, removing, dismantling, or raising 50% or more of the exterior structural materials of the subject building. So it's pretty carefully worded. I want you to be okay with that language, because it's not every bell or whistle on the building. It's really getting to the structure of the building, not the siding. That is to say that you could take the siding off the building and take the roofing, and that could constitute a good deal of the materials, and that wouldn't be captured. So, I mean, just think through.
Well, because that means like this one on removing 2 chimneys, would that no longer come before us?
It probably would not.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So the other thing in thinking about these changes is the exigencies of town meeting are beyond us now.
Mhm.
We were kind of
Right.
racing to the end point because we thought we might be able to get this on town meeting. So really, the only thing I would suggest to you is you just close the hearing tonight. You really don't have to make any decision on adopting any of these amendments or not, but you'll have it at your disposal to do with what you will. So you should, you should think of how you want to define demolition. I mean, on one side is, what is the purpose of the demolition delay bylaw? It's not design review. But the other side is, you're right, something like the chimneys on a structure can be significant to that building, but also not constitute a great deal of
Right.
materials.
Right.
Yeah. So I leave those thornier questions to you, but just trying to explain how I drafted certain things.
May I ask, would other communities try defining down to, like, 50% in general, but except for chimneys, blah, 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 blah? Or does that just get too unwieldy?
I just think the more specific you get, you're bound to leave something out.
Right,
Yeah, I agree with that.
yeah.
I think, like I said last time, if you're really concerned with design review, there's an opportunity for you to do broaden historic districts, add new historic districts. That's really the way to do it.
Right, so you have the districts.
And then I just clarified, this demolition permit is only used for purposes of Article 2, so I added that clarifier in. And then under enforcement, I added the clarifier. Before it just said separate offense up to the value of the property. There has to be some kind of objective measure of that when it's coming in, because nobody's gonna do an appraisal, so then they can do enforcement. So the only objective measure I know of is to go by the assessed value, which isn't always
Right.
accurate, but it's someplace to start. And I think those were all the changes, because we really had a pretty lengthy discussion last time.
We did.
Yeah.
No, and it looked like you captured all the changes that we discussed, so. Did anyone have questions for John while he's here? Then I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing on this, and then we can look to take it up at another time prior to kind of our next opportunity for a town meeting,
Yeah,
if that makes sense to the board.
Yep. yeah,
All right, then I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll move it.
Second?
So motion's been made by Mr. Jones, seconded by Mr. Lowney. All those in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Any in opposition? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you very much, John. I appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Sean.
Thank you.
I would suggest to the board that we probably look to take that back up this late spring, early summer, and start looking towards getting it to the selectmen for their review and consideration. All right, Mr. Crowell is here, so we will reopen. It is past 6:18, so we will reopen public hearing for HH 2022-4. It is the public hearing for Catherine Zulig, owner, who's filed a notice of intent for partial demolition of a building 100 years or older. The subject property is 708 Main Street, map 41, parcel B5, located in the Harwich Center Historic District. And at the same time, we have a public hearing for, also from Catherine Zulig, owner, who's applied for a certificate of appropriateness to alter a building or structure in the Harwich Center Historic District. The subject property, again, is 708 Main Street, map 41, parcel B5. Good evening, Mr. Crowell.
Good evening, Madam Chairperson. My apologies to the board. The Board of Appeals meets at 7. The Planning Board meets at 6:30. You folks meet at 6. I had it on my calendar for 6, and I was toying with the idea of being early for once at 10 after 6 when my client called frantically, saying, "Where are you?"
You're fine.
So I apologize.
You're here.
This is Katerina Zulig,
Good evening.
the owner of the property, seated to my right. And for the record, I'm Attorney William Crowell from Harwich Court. And the petition before you has two aspects, as you know. One is, and as I see it, it's because the building, number one, is more than 100 years old. Number two, it's in the historic center district, Harwich Center. So the legal ad and the petition broke it down into a certificate of appropriateness, which I think is more for the historic center district, and a notice of intent to demolish basically the foundation and provide a new foundation and move the house back to 25 feet from the road as opposed to 16 feet 9 inches, and to renovate the house. I wanted to, and I'm assuming everybody has their packet and has had a chance to review it, but just, again, for the record, the project as described by Brigitte Steins from Inkstone Architects, who could not be here this evening, but on her March 15, 2022 correspondence, she outlines that the scope includes moving the building back to 25 feet, constructing a new poured concrete foundation with a concrete slab and basement area, replacing the unstable brick foundation, removing the unsalvageable connector structure in the back, restoring the shed at the back of the property, replacing all the windows while maintaining the existing siding, adding a front portico with new steps and railing, adding a back addition for mudroom and stairs to the basement, removing both brick chimneys, adding back shutters and moving the flower box brackets at the front facade, adding one skylight, improving the site with a paved driveway, 2 parking spaces and a patio, and relocating the septic tank. She also provided pictures and noted that this is known as the Kelly House, and I know on the Macris site there's a whole, there's a plethora of information about this property. Mr. Doan and I would remember it as the McGillen House when we were growing up. I even stayed overnight there one time.
Me too.
You did also. And with all due respect to McGillen's, it wasn't in the best of shape then either. In any event, it has, we included the site plans with the petition to show you the house with the dotted line footprint as it exists now at 16 feet 9 inches from the property line and the petition is seeking to move it to 25 feet to the front of the portico. Right, but it's 25 feet to the front of the portico, it's 30 to the front of the building. But the portico would count as a structure for zoning purposes, so we're making it compliant with zoning for once. Not in front of the Board of Appeals, but I asking for a variance or to intensify an existing nonconformity or anything of that nature. Also included was the report of the condition of the property. I won't read that. I'm assuming you all have that. Looks like this.
And who was that by? I couldn't see who actually wrote that letter. Sorry to interrupt.
It was a structure engineer, the company is called Colonial Restorations.
Okay.
LLC,
Mhm.
and we do have a spare copy.
That's okay. I didn't know who actually wrote the letter. I couldn't see. It was blurred at the bottom.
From Fiskdale, Fiskdale, Massachusetts.
Okay, structural engineer.
Specializing in older homes.
Okay, thank you.
So as I see it, what we're asking for is a determination of non-significance, where we're not asking to demolish and replace historically significant or non-significant property. We're petitioning for less than complete demolition. And our argument is that the proposed work would not destroy or substantially diminish the historical significance of the structure. And I know from the Macris site and all of the background of the property, that it coincides with the architectural style of the era in which it was built. Again, with all due respect to the prior owners, the McGillen family, the Kelly family, and so forth, I don't think that anybody of historical significance has resided there, or there's been any other significant events other than Mr. Doan and I have stayed overnight at the property.
When was it built?
It was built prior to 1876, about 1850. And so I was going to say, the only thing historically that I saw as significant, but not really, is that when the first Exchange Hall burned down, this house burned down.
Correct.
Correct.
So then they rebuilt it. I would argue that the Exchange Hall had historic significance, but not this dwelling. In terms of our code, we acknowledge that we are listed in the Massachusetts Register of Historical, because we're in the Historic Center District, and I believe that's also a national register as well, so we know the significance of where we're located, and we're acknowledging that. But I don't, as I said, I don't see that, know of any historical significance to the owners of the property or the particular architectural style making this property unique by itself. As I said, it conforms to the architectural style of Main Street, Harwich Center, and the era in which it was constructed. So I don't think it has that much historical significance by itself. And the important part is, for me, is that Ms. Zulig is not asking to demolish the structure entirely. She wants to renovate it as her architect has explained in the all the specifics that were contained in the petition. She's looking to renovate it, she's looking to move it back. Why? It's going to be a single-family residence, she wants to be further back from the street. Create a nicely landscaped front yard, have a paved driveway to make it easier when it snows. And by the way, you folks are historical people, so you probably already know this, but my grandmother told me one time, she said, you know why all those houses in Harwich Center are up by the street? And I, no. And she said, because it was less distance for your horse to pull the buggy out of the barn when it snowed to get to Main Street. So they're all right up on the street, so it would be easier to get the horse and buggy out. She doesn't have a horse and buggy, she doesn't need to be that close to the street, and would like to be a little further back. So we're asking the board to find that this is an appropriate renovation and that this is, make a finding of non-significance where there's not going to be complete demolition and allow the project to go forward. In my opinion, I think it's a great project. This house has been somewhat of an eyesore for quite some time. It's been fairly run down for quite some time, unoccupied. Ms. Zulik wants to bring it back and put some money into it. She does not have an unlimited budget, however, but wants to put money into it to put it on a full foundation and renovate it and bring it up to par with other properties in Harwich Center. I also feel, having grown up in Harwich Center, that this is another brick in the building back of Harwich Center. I think you folks did an excellent job with the market across the street. You had 7 or 8 hearings. I happened to be sitting in on several of them, and I think it just fits in nicely with that whole line of those buildings. So I commend you on that. We're on the other side of the street, and I think with the clothing store there, this would complement that nicely and start building down towards Brooks Library, another building block in the overall streetscape of Harwich Center. So we're hoping that you would make that finding on both of those issues tonight. Thank you.
Before I ask questions, John, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
For our perspective, to me, the more important application for us is really the certificate of appropriateness, because I think we can address all of the issues in just that certificate of appropriateness. Or do you think that we need to address both separately? The demolition and then we have traditionally kind of just dealt with the certificate of appropriateness.
Yeah, I think as Mr. Crowell suggested, that's an easy finding to make. I mean, they're two separate matters, but I credit the argument that, and I think he cited the right section, that for really what you're looking to find is that this work, the demolition work involved, isn't going to impair the recognized significance of that building.
Okay.
But I think you can hear it as one matter.
Okay.
And ultimately just incorporate that as part of your findings.
All right, thank you very much. So we'll start with questions from the board. Mr. Doan, would you like
Sure.
to start?
I'm going to probably focus more at this point on the historic district, as it is located in a historic district. And I'm going to go down through some of the points made by the architect, the bullet points that were made. You know, and the first one was moving the building back from the street further. We have been making an effort in Harwich Center to move buildings not further away from the street, but to bring them in where they would be traditionally built in that time frame. A good example exactly is 711 Main Street, where the original plan was for that to be substantially back on the lot, and we had asked them and said that no, you really have to bring that up to the line of the other buildings. So and they obliged, and I think it came out very well. So I'd be very hesitant to allow this to be pushed back further, being in the historic district. The new, pouring the new foundation, constructing new poured concrete foundation and slab, I certainly have no issue with putting in a full basement. However, as part of our guidelines for the historic district, page 19, foundations must be repaired and not replaced. Certainly the new basement can be considered, but I do question the basement windows, because that's going to it looks like it's forcing the rise of the building to be higher. But I do want to discuss that probably with our building inspector, whether there's a safety issue, because these windows were not typically in the old houses. And you'd be adding a new feature on the elevation that would be seen from the street, but I'm not sure of safety requirements and that concern. So the bricks, and that's not to say you can't do a cement basement, but you would still have to maintain the brick facade on the visible part of the house, and ideally reusing existing bricks, or if you had to do new bricks, you would have to come before us with the exact bricks so we could approve them. Removing the unsalvageable connector in back. Usually, again, our guidelines call for always restoration with original materials. This, however, it is probably not original to the building because it's shingled versus clapboard and different roof slope, etc. So I think that we could talk about that being taken off and possibly rebuilt. It is interesting that even though the connector was looks like it was pretty cheaply built, they did have some ornate shingles on it that maybe we'd want to have that somehow recreated. Restoring the shed in the back of the property. I don't personally have a problem with relocating that shed to the property, but that, again, be open for general discussion. Replacing all the windows. This is, again, referred to our guidelines. On page 35, we have quite a write-up about windows. And, of course, if they were original wooden windows, that is the correct thing to do, would be to repair those windows and reuse them. But they were changed over to vinyl at some point, 20, 30 years ago, probably. They did maintain the 2/1, which appears to be the original lights, the way they configured the window. So I think that's something we can consider. We can talk about possible materials that could be used, and I'm not the expert on that here, but we do have someone who more is. Adding the front portico with the new steps and railing. I have a little problem with this personally because I don't think there was ever a portico on that house. I'd be interested if your research ever turned up that there was a substantial overhang and columns. Again, I would tend to say that what's there is appropriate. The door is very original and looks in pretty good shape. It's wooden, should be restored. And replacing the existing door wouldn't be appropriate. And page 12 of our guidelines goes into that in more detail about porticos and doors. Adding the back addition with the stairs to the back basement, I think that is open for consideration. If it's keeping in with the overall architecture of the building. Remove both brick chimneys. Page 19 of our guidelines very clear that brick chimneys cannot or should not be removed from a building in a historic district. I did find an old photograph and looking at the two chimneys, the front chimney does appear to be original. The back chimney, I think, was relocated. because an original picture from looking up at from the Exchange Hall shows them both at the top of the ridge line of the roof. And when you look at the second chimney, it's clearly not, the bricks look different and everything. So I'm not sure about that one, but definitely would want to consider keeping the chimneys. Adding back shutters and removing the flower box brackets, that's fine. Those brackets were never there, as far as I could tell. Not original. Adding one skylight, page 33 is very clear that skylights may not be added in the historic district unless there's evidence of a previous skylight in the building, and that could be considered to be replaced if there was an original skylight. Doing the paved driveway, 2 spaces and patio. My only concern there would be wanting to look at the materials of the driveway. You know, it is very visible from the street, and I believe that has always been a dirt driveway. I don't think it ever had paving, other than maybe gravel or something at one time. So I think we'd want to review what materials would be used there. Obviously, relocating the septic tank, that's not really a historic topic. The only thing would be is if there's any exposed pipes and air vents, they'd have to be hidden from public view somehow. Now, one thing that wasn't mentioned in this was the quite a bit of rework on windows. It looks like you're adding quite a few windows, taking out some, particularly on the west side, and you're removing the door on the west side, which is, then again, appears to be original. So I would, again, page 35 is on our things. It really says not to remove windows and not to add windows. Again, I think that can be a discussion point, but I would definitely lean to not touching the windows other than replacing the inside, you know, the sashes, etc. You know, again, unless, you know, an argument can be made for architectural needing or it might be appropriate, I think that's a good discussion point for the whole board. And those are the key items that I came up with.
Next.
Let me go next. Just a couple of questions about material. On the windows, I know you mentioned the Anderson 200 series, and prior to this year, they were only doing like a simulated divided light, meaning you would look between, so the grills would be applied on the front and on the back, but there would be nothing in between, so you kind of can see through it.
Right.
They do now make a full divided light, not true
Okay.
divided light, that's for like an original window, but they make an FDL. So I confirmed that today, so that 200 series, if you were doing the 4/1, you know, ideally we would look for that, they call it a spacing bar in between, but it's called an FDL, full divided light, and the Anderson 200 series does make that. So, but that's a clad window, so it's a vinyl clad on the outside. You know, the next series up is the 400 series and A series. But the fact that the 200 series is now making that full divided light, you know, we talked about windows before.
Right.
You know, that's a nice feature to have because it's,
May I ask a question,
Sure.
though? The original windows are 2/1, though. Is
correct.
that-
So that would be a preference of the
Right.
board. You know, when I look at it, I would go either way on that. The 4/1 or 2/1. So there'd just be a preference of the board. We can talk more about that as well. Material on the back portion, you had an alternative from the hardy shingles to the alternative pre-finished vertical siding. Is there a preference on which one you'd like to do, or it's still undecided?
It's still undecided, we're debating what the best visual
Okay.
solution is.
Just on that back portion.
Also, yeah, from material standpoint, we know that hardy backfill is very sustainable,
Mhm.
also longevity wise,
Yeah.
it's durable.
Yep.
But, yeah, we have to flesh out the details, I think she, put the shingles into the plan,
Mm-hmm.
my architect, but again, we're not married to that agreement.
Okay. And then I kind of agree with Bob said about the brick in both locations around the foundation. And, whether, the back chimney, I guess, can be removed and keep the one in the center, but keeping that look. And then as far as the shed, what would be the material used on the shed? Would that also mirror would you do the board and batten look, vertical pine, or would you do the hardy shingles?
So the shed would remain, if it's salvageable. I mean,
Yeah, so you're gonna try and move it?
Yeah, it's a question still whether it is, but if it is, we would just move it to the back.
Okay, just move to the back. And then last question for Bill. ZBA, are you still planning, I would assume you would still have to go in front of them for the non-conforming portion of this?
Well,
Even though you're not creating any new non-conformities, but would you have to still go to ZBA?
Yes, because we would be, even though we'd be making it conforming on the, as far as the front setback for 25 feet, we would be altering, renovating, expanding a pre-existing non-conforming structure that doesn't conform to the sideline setback.
So you'd
So
be
we
looking,
would
yeah,
Need a special permit from the Board of Appeals to intensify those non-conforming.
yeah. So I think in whatever findings we have tonight, to maybe include that acknowledgement they're going in front of another board for the shed location and moving the building back. So whether that's something we want to talk about, maybe you can talk more to that.
And if I may follow up on that, it's important to our petition with the Board of Appeals to know where the footprint of the house is going to be.
Correct. Okay, thank you.
Just glancing through, I see you've got a couple of ideas on outside lights. Bob, do those conform?
I did not really study those lights at this point to see whether they do or not. I figured there are a lot major issues
Yeah.
beforehand we got to resolve before we look at a lot of detail, because we still need to look at the examples of the windows and things like that, and I'd want to bring back that and look at the lighting, yeah.
You hit everything else that I was concerned about, especially the skylight.
Yeah.
Julie, any questions?
I think you guys have covered just about everything, so.
So the couple of things that I do, I guess, I will ask Mr. Cole, would your client consider not moving the house back and keeping it? And I'm gonna also ask the question, because I don't know off the top of my head, how it lines up with the house next door.
It's still in front, I believe, of Mr. Bradley's
Okay.
Doric columns, is that what they are?
I was there today, and it is still going to be in front.
Yeah.
It'll still be in front of
It'll
that.
still be
The
closer.
house almost goes back, that 14 feet where that little fence is now,
Yeah.
and it is definitely still going to be in front of Mr. Bradley's.
If I
Okay.
may say so, because I think there's only one window on the side of the bigger building
Mhm.
where the exchange hall and
Yep.
Brett's store used to be. So that a lot of times when I'm driving by, I don't even notice this house because it's the big building and then it's the Greek revival. So to me, it wouldn't make a big difference visually whether the house is moved back another 14 feet if it had no portico and another only 8 feet if it had the portico. Wouldn't make that much difference to me visually. But to answer your question, it's a biggie for Missouli to move this house back. That's a big issue for her.
Can I ask a question about if
Yeah.
you, let's say you don't move it, would that spark a problem to put the portico in front?
Probably not, because we are non-conforming already. So to add a portico, I don't think the Board of Appeals would find that that would be a substantial detriment to the entire neighborhood.
Okay.
We can come closer to the street
Mhm.
because we're already less than 25 feet,
Okay,
so you can intensify that
so, okay,
coming closer
okay.
by special permit.
I will also concur with my colleagues too on the, I would prefer to see the foundation at least have the brick facade on it, so that that maintains the same character that it had now, if that's possible. Bob, you had a question?
No, just when,
Or
we didn't
comment.
cover colors,
Correct.
but I would just, on colors, I just, again, look at our guidelines, and I think what you're doing is all within it, but have your architect review our guidelines to make sure colors, when you come back with your color palettes and stuff, that are appropriate for the historic district and that type of building.
So I know that there's a number of issues here.
Mhm.
My attitude is that we don't necessarily want to just fix up and create the house that existed in 1876. We have an owner who is very interested in preserving this house and is willing to invest a significant amount of money in it, but it's still her house. And she wants it to be her house and not somebody's house that built it in 1876, all within the guidelines as much as possible, but keeping in mind, as you know, that after a year, she could move it 50 feet back, or she could,
No.
Well, no, she couldn't, because it's
If
in
it's
the historic
historic
district.
I'm sorry. I withdraw that statement. I knew it was a risky one, but in any event, we're trying to work with the board as much as possible, and we're hoping that you will work with us to come out with something that we all can live with. It's trying not to be an adversarial proceeding, but something where it's cooperative within certain parameters. I mean, to me, it wouldn't be crucial whether it never had a portico before, because portico is not a big ticket item to me. A big ticket item to the owner is when you move the house. I know you can say, well, then don't move it, but she wants to move the house. When you move the house, those chimneys are not gonna make it. They've already been looked at, they just won't make it. So, I don't know how the board would feel about, you're talking about a facade around the foundation, about a faux chimney that gives it the look that it used to have, of the one chimney way back when, but without really being a chimney.
So I have a comment from my end. I was against moving it further away from the street because we have really tried to make a streetscape. That being said, considering it's still going to be closer to the street than the house next door, I'm more apt to be okay with that. Just as my thoughts. I don't know what a fake chimney is going to look like, and I think this board would want to know what a fake chimney is going to look like before they move forward. I don't get the sense that my board is ready to vote this evening. I could be wrong. We have proposed a meeting for Wednesday, the 11th. I don't know what your zoning board of appeals day is, but I'm wondering
It's not
if,
it. End of the month.
would you have time to come back with some examples and perhaps some comments on at least some of the comments that the board members have made this evening, and then we could maybe be in a better position to
What?
to go forward? Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Oh, I
mean,
definitely
I'm not
wanna-
trying to
Yeah,
force
yeah.
it on
No,
you
no,
guys.
no, no.
Yeah,
I
it's
definitely
not-
want to move forward, but
Yeah. It is a lot of information.
it is.
It's a well-done application with all the information we need. There's just a couple of questions that I think we need. I do have one more question
Go
for,
ahead.
so moving the building, have you met with the contractor to see if the building will survive that move? I know the chimneys wouldn't make it, obviously. I've actually been in that house. I've seen the Cape Cod cellar, the crawl space. I understand. I have a house very similar to that I restored. So I've been in the house. I know what's going on. Were there any reservations about the house not making the move back? Or was that,
They weren't, in fact, everybody we talked to, like from the structural engineer to people who specialize in moving houses, we actually just met one today who was very prone to do that kind of work. And they all recommended moving it and building the foundation. We also had estimates in terms of saving or reviving the cistern. And the benefits of doing that work versus having a new foundation, everybody said that the house will thank us, and it's
Mhm.
just a different level of, having a good foundation for that house, for the work that needs to be done upstairs. And to your other question, there shouldn't be any problems.
If it moving
Soil
it.
is good, and to move it straight back, they were all very much in favor of doing that.
If I may ask a
Yes.
question of Mr. Dono, it's a
Mhm.
little unclear when you were talking about a foundation, about
Right.
a new foundation.
Right. So the guidelines clearly say to retain and restore the brick foundation. However, I think it is appropriate if you're putting in a full cellar to make a cement, type thing. But in order to keep the integrity of the brick is to reuse those same bricks as the facade around the concrete.
Around what?
The concrete,
around
So-
the wall?
Poured concrete
concrete.
foundation?
Yeah,
yes.
it's like you're
That's where
veneering.
I'm not clear on what you're saying.
Right.
Because we're talking about a full foundation.
Right,
Poured concrete.
right.
And you're saying that's okay as long as you have brick facade so that it looks like a brick foundation?
Absolutely.
From the street, it looks
From
like a
the
brick
street.
foundation.
Right,
Right. You're almost veneering
Yes.
the
Yeah.
foundation.
yeah, but I would require using authentic bricks, not a Brickmaster or, one of those other coverings, but it have to be authentic bricks.
Well, we have chimney
You-
bricks.
Well, no, and you got,
You're
well,
gonna
you
have
got,
foundation bricks
you
too.
got plenty of foundation bricks. So,
Yeah, save the brick.
That's good.
and that's all Pride Barnstable brick too.
Oh, yes, definitely gotta save that.
Yeah, so,
So the bricks that you're talking about, Mr. Dono, you're talking about that are already existing on the
Yes.
site?
yeah,
At the
Mhm.
foundation as it presently exists?
right.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, you're just saying repurpose the existing bricks
Bricks.
that make the foundation as the veneer for
Right.
for whatever the poured concrete is,
Right.
so that that's what you see from this street.
Yep.
Any street or public way, you'd be able to see the brick.
I mean, I'm not an engineer, but I think it is possible to bring the cement only up to the level of the ground and use an authentic brick foundation. But I'm not an engineer, so I couldn't say whether that's practical or not.
It just depends how they design it. So
Yeah.
there's multiple ways to do that
Is there?
application.
Yeah.
Not using the bricks as support for the house?
Well, no, I was saying, yeah, use the bricks for support.
Uh,
Yeah. I said I'm not an engineer, so I would,
Me either, but my attitude is,
Right. yeah.
they're already.
I think we're leaning towards more veneer application.
Yeah.
I'd be
Whether
fine
you
with the
can.
veneer,
yeah.
as long as you saw the brick from the,
Yeah.
as long as, if you're looking at it from the street, that you still see a brick foundation.
Just
That
maintains
would
the
be in
historic.
keeping with the character of the house as it currently exists.
If I may.
Yeah.
Yes, go right ahead.
I also like to make comments.
I'm sorry? Yes.
Yeah. So,
If I may,
yeah.
Yes,
when you're ready. When you're ready.
okay.
Um,
We do have, so before let me stop you. We do have members of the public that did want to speak as well.
go ahead.
So do you want to let them speak first?
Do you want,
And
can I
I'm going to let Mr. Doan make his comment as well.
now or?
You can, you
Okay. No,
you can go first.
yeah, I just want to again, consider that, this house is in a historic district. And the historic district was decided by the town. It's not a big one, but it is a critical one because it's the original heart of Harwich. And so I do feel we have guidelines, they're available. And while the board does have the ability to, make changes and give leniency on some of the items and not be so strict, I do want to say that this is an historic district, and I think we need to follow as much as possible because, when we let this one a lot of exceptions, then the next one's going to come in and then expect a lot of exceptions. I do think this house is significant to the period, the architecture. It may be a very simple architecture as opposed to the Albro House, but it is truly Harwich and what was built during that time in the center. And that's why I'm very much wanting to see us follow the guidelines wherever we can, yet try to be flexible, like on the windows and the back, addition and things like that, because the natural evolution of houses, they do put additions typically out back, and there is a natural evolution that goes on, and that's fine. But the important part is this the primary or principal elevations that face the street, mainly the west and south, although the east too, because even though it's got bushes and things from the neighbor, it does cover it up. Those are really critical elevations that I do feel very important to keep as much as possible. And certainly would be willing to talk about go by window of what they want to do, because there's a small window which is probably clearly in the bathroom on the east west elevation. That's probably not original. It's a small window, and that should probably be replaced. That could be, but for the most part, I think we need to keep true to the mission of the historic district and keep as much as possible and restore it, because the whole point is restoration, not changing in a historic district. And that's my opinion.
Members of the public. Duncan,
Yes.
please state your name for the record.
Duncan Berry, resident of West Harwich. Didn't intend to speak on this, but my thought is that I concur with Mr. Doan. I think that hearing this and having paid attention to these matters for some time myself as well, the nature of the district, and particularly this kind of district, exists, and the quality of the experience exists for the people that walk on the street. And that streetscape that you've worked so hard to establish is exactly what people actually love in places like Nantucket, where the buildings are a little bit tighter to the street. In Beacon Hill, where they're tighter to the street. It creates an outdoor room and a sense of civic connection. And when you move a structure off of it, you're actually kind of importing suburban lawn conventions into a situation where those didn't exist at the time. So the very desire for that space actually destroys the utility of the space in front, because it's not really a usable place because you're right out on the street. And it also diminishes the privacy that you do have in the back, which is one of the reasons why structures are sited like that. So I just wanted to make a comment in favor of that, with all due respect and with all belief in the leniency of that you express, but I do wanted to speak up in favor of what I think your inclination is, so this is a matter of support.
Thanks, Duncan. Is there anybody
you.
else that wishes to speak on this matter?
I have a
Yes.
question. I'm
Yep,
sorry,
can
I'm-
you just state your name for the record?
Yeah, my name's John Carey. I have a question regarding, just because I'm unfamiliar, what role does cost play in the board's decision to recommend things like a brick facade? Like, I know the house, and it looks like there's about 2 rows of bricks, and to kind of, I build houses for a living, and to, basically put the, top shelf being brick, could be thousands of dollars for the homeowner. And to see 2 rows of bricks, may not be totally practical. So what level of decision does the cost play in you guys making recommendations for that?
So we take everything into consideration. However, it is a historic building in a historic district, and that's one of the onuses that you have when you own a building in a historic district. It's a National Register district and it's a local historic district, so it kind of comes with the territory.
So the costs are just.
We take anything into consideration, and we try to work with the property owners. I think we've been fairly consistent in doing that across the board, but that is always a consideration for both us and for the owners when they buy the properties. Mr. Crowell.
Thank you. I don't know what the cost would be to rebuild a brick chimney, but I am assuming it would be significant. And I don't know how much of the brick can be used for facade, so what if there isn't enough brick for the facade around the foundation? What do we do? But I think that we're not that far off, except for the moving of the building. And I think this residence is unique in that even when you're walking down Main Street, you've got that with the old Exchange Hall site and that big building with the masons up top and the clothing store. You don't see it in the streetscape. You don't see this because it's already set back almost 17 feet. You don't see it, and then when Mr. Bradley's hedge, so we're coming the other way, you don't see it. So I don't see that much significance in I respect the integrity of where it presently exists. And I understand everything Mr. Doan said and your guidelines, but I don't see this as that significant a move to go from basically 17 feet to 25 feet. 8 feet is like the length of that desk from Julie to Brendan. I don't see that as that great. If the board was inclined to be flexible on that, we might be able to work other things out, and the foundation, I think, is workable. I don't know about the chimney yet. We'll have to go back to the architect, see if she has any ideas on that. Skylight is the skylight. If it's not allowed, it's not allowed. But we don't absolutely have to have a portico. Be functional. There's a reason for having those. When you're standing at the door, knocking on the door, coming out, it's blocking the rain and the snow from getting you wet. I don't think it's unattractive. I think it's very attractive. So I don't think we're that far off, and we're willing to come back on May 11th and maybe feed some information through the architect to you in the meantime to review and consider.
That would be helpful.
But again, you pointed out that Mr. Bradley's house is still further back than this house, even when we moved it back the 8 feet. So, hoping
Yes. Are we all set?
we're hoping that the board will see its way to work with us as far as the location is concerned.
Thank you.
Just one little thought that I have concerning historic districts in general. One of the reasons historic districts are made is to maintain the look and the integrity of the history of the area. And yes, it may not be seen perfectly at this time period because of bushes from the other houses or another building, but 100 years from now, people are gonna be looking, and they want to see in a historic district what it was. And that's why when you move a house, you have to be very careful and think about not just now, but in the future. And when you buy a house in a historic district, you have to think about how it applies to the future as well. And that's, I think, one of the things Mr. Doan is also considering too. And that's one of the reasons that we sit on this, is to take all of this into consideration. It may not be super important right now, but it is in the whole realm of the idea of being a historic district and in the history of the future.
What's the board's pleasure at this point? You're agreeable to a continuance until May 11th. Then I would suggest that we entertain a motion to continue to May 11th, no earlier than 6 p.m. And then whatever information you can get us in advance, Mr. Crowell, we will be happy to review.
We are on a time frame with
Mhm.
trying to file with the Board of Appeals also, and getting through those appeal periods, assuming we were approved, so that construction could begin after Labor Day.
Mhm.
So the month is about, it's pushing it, but it's as far as we can go, assuming everything else goes fairly smooth.
Understood. I think you have a good sense of what the board's thinking and where some of the sticking points are at this point.
All right.
Patty, I don't know that we have a continuance agreement with us this evening, do you?
No, did not bring one.
All right, so as long as you're agreeable to continue to May 11th, no earlier than 6 p.m., then the chair would entertain that motion.
So moved.
Motion's been made by Mr. Doan. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Julie Eldridge. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any in opposition? Hearing none, motion carries. I thank you very much. And
You're welcome. You might have thought better about 5:30, so I'd be there on.
it's the first time I've seen you be late, so I'm not concerned. And just for your information, the matter that was before you, that was also continued to that date, talked about fake chimneys, so,
I'm aware of it.
okay. Just making sure, sir.
Thank you for all of your time and consideration tonight.
Do you have neat copies of the guidelines?
Sure.
There's a couple. Share with your
Just
architect.
happen to have
Those are on the web
several
page.
with you.
Oh, no, they're on our website.
All right, the next matter on our agenda. Patty, did we have meeting minutes? I didn't see any.
No, did not get them.
Okay, we'll skip over the meeting minutes. We have a notice of intent application to review an amended form of it.
That's a new one.
Which looks to be the one dated March 2022. Does anybody have any comments or questions about it? John, you want to address it for us? Thank you.
We discussed this a little bit at the last meeting.
We did.
So I just wanted to confirm that all the things that were going to be added to that Article 2 in terms of the attachments were in that form, and they are now.
Great.
One of the reasons we discussed not wanting to put those specifics into the bylaw, because then you can't change them with the agility you might need to.
Right.
But all those matters that were going to be included in that draft version of the bylaw are in that form.
Fantastic. So, does anybody have questions for John on the application? No?
Seems straightforward.
Does the board wish to take a vote to approve the new application?
I move to approve the new application.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor of the new application for a notice of intent, say aye.
Aye.
Any in opposition? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, John. The next matter on our agenda is the discussion and review of a draft preservation restriction for the West Harwich Schoolhouse Building, 5 Bells Neck Road in West Harwich. I will be honest and upfront, this was part of the reason that I was looking forward to proposing a special meeting on the 11th, is so that we could ask council to, town council to show up and give us some guidance. It is certainly drafted as a preservation restriction, as a local one. However, there's some information that needs to be filled in, and I think there are a number of questions which I think we need to find out as to what our role is and how we would hold it and what we would need to do if we were in fact the holders of it. So I would propose that we do that. I don't know if anybody had any questions or comments on it as it exists currently, or if you'd like to just defer that to a subsequent meeting and ask council to come and review it with us.
I'd like to have a review with council.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So then we will, yeah, question?
No, I didn't. Are we gonna ask for any public input on this at this point?
I don't think we're just in a public meeting. We're not in a public hearing per se. Was there anybody that had questions about it? No?
Oh, okay. And
Then, yeah.
Well, I don't have a question, but I just want to let you guys know that I'm the one that's trying to purchase it and build some houses
Okay.
in the town of Harwich. And I know it was a historic meeting, and I don't know how other elements of this play in, but I'd like to let you guys know that it's not exactly the most profitable project. I'm trying to provide housing in this town. I already have 3 units. I'm trying to provide tax base. I'm trying to save the structure, and I'm trying to work with the West Harwich people to provide some type of plaque or something where people could come look at it and say, oh, this is what this is, and provide some source to community. Unfortunately, I will say that it's not as simple as it used to be to build housing. There's a reason nobody builds housing down here anymore, and there's a reason a lot of people my age don't live down here because there's nowhere to live.
Right.
So I just caution you respectfully that the draft of what I received about an hour ago is probably not going to work for the housing stuff. It basically puts me in a position of caretaker of the property, and while I'm going to put about $1 million into the structure, I'm not going to tear it down and put $1 million into it. Having to basically present, kind of treat it like a historic district as we saw with the lady in front of me, unfortunately probably is not going to work for what I'm trying to provide the town.
So a bid went out with a potential for historic preservation restriction on it. This is what town council has proposed to us. So we have an obligation to look at what's been proposed by town council and then discuss it further. So, there are any different number of ways that a historic preservation can be. This is a local preservation restriction. You can also there can be preservation restrictions that are subject to state approval as well. So, this is new territory for this board. So before we just go and accept anything, we are going to review it. But you also have to understand that you submitted on a bid with the potential of having a restriction on it. So that comes with the territory as part of the bid. So we have to do our due diligence on that as well. So, this will be part of our meeting next time around. It may or may not have an executive session portion of it if town council feels that it's appropriate for us to receive advice and counsel outside of the general public. So we will see all of those issues, but I just want to make you aware of that ahead of time. So we've got to take a look at it and do our homework first too, right?
The process.
Yeah, and every application is different. So there's not a lot of precedent that we move forward, maybe in the district, but outside that, every application is treated separately and different. So just keep that in mind. Your example about the brick veneer, I know that stepping back a stem wall and doing the 18-inch veneer all around, the costs associated with that. But there's also the element of that last one where you have 200 series Anderson windows. We're not making you go to A series or 400 series or the Woodwrights, you know, so that the 200 series would work there, even though they're a vinyl window.
Because my fear would be, I'd have to agree to this restriction before I purchase the building, and then I go to renovate, and all of a sudden, you know, it's already gonna be a tight project, trying to restore this building, and then every, you know, you have to do this one, you have to do this product, you do this product. It unfortunately, these projects have to break even, at least for me, because my plan is to hold the building for 30 years. So I don't need to make money on the project, I'm not selling. I need to make, I need to break even to be able to restore the project and keep it kind of back to basis. So it's not even a money thing, it's about being able to get the project finished and occupied for 30 years. That's my project.
Yeah.
But, you know, unfortunately, if you say you have to go with these, you know, this. I want to save the building, I'll restrict the building so it can't be torn down, it can't be substantially altered. But, you know, the way this thing was reading, it's like, you know, the breakdown of submitting, it's just, the process would probably be difficult to respect. But I appreciate you guys.
So understood. We have to review it
Yeah.
from our perspective as well and see, you know, it also has to make sense
Yeah, and I'm
for
on
us
the
to be
time.
able to enforce it as well. But also keeping in mind, it's still an older building that would still be subject to our notices of intent. So, so that's not something that's going away either by virtue of the preservation restrictions.
One
So.
bigger question I had is, and this might be for the insurance company, but buildings restricted, it's beautiful, everyone's happy, and like a hurricane happens or a fire or something, and it is like actually destroyed. What happens then? Am I being sued to rebuild it as historically, like how does that work?
John, thanks.
There's provisions in there
Exactly.
for that. Can I make a couple of comments?
Please, go right ahead.
Yeah, that'd be great, yeah.
Because I did.
And I
So,
appreciate it.
so John Odman's our,
Yeah, no,
our
more than happy
town-
to,
Pretty new.
yeah.
our town planner and director of community development, so.
I want to talk about some big picture issues you should be thinking about even when council comes in.
Yep.
And I think the predicate issue, and I just want to be totally honest with this, do you want to hold the restriction? You don't have to hold the restriction. Board of Selectmen can hold the restriction. Understand, this isn't like a regulatory matter where you can call in the building commissioner to enforce for you. If there's anything that goes wrong, enforcement is totally a legal matter, and you get the attorneys involved. So something happens, where's your counsel at beck and call? You don't have one, and you actually have to go seek funding to have your counsel. So the predicate, I think the predicate question is this something the Historic Commission should hold, or perhaps should you have what I would consider an advise and consent role in the restriction? So just something to, big picture to think about. It's also somewhat of a confusing restriction to me. I think the attorney tried to draft it in such a way that it was kind of user-friendly. You didn't have to get the state involved. At the same time, it's confusing because the language in here says it's a Chapter 184, Section 31 through 33 restriction, which is the standard statutory conservation restriction that you would do if you were doing a tax credit project. And the Historic Commission would sign off, and the Selectmen would sign off, and the state MHC would sign off. But then in another section of this, it kind of calls it a deed restriction. The importance of all that is, you know, can its enforceability be challenged over time if you don't meet the statutory criteria? And this hedges its bets by saying, well, it's in perpetuity, but if for some reason it's not in perpetuity, then it's good for 30 years and you can re-record those restrictions every 20 years thereafter. So it kind of says two things at various points and hedges the bets. So, I mean, I think both you and the Board of Selectmen and the applicant have to be clear, what are the expectations here? What sort of restriction is this? I think the other important big picture I would think about is there's a difference between restoration and preservation. Understand that this is on Macris as a resource, but it was deemed by MHC not eligible for listing because of the vinyl siding, among other things. So there are clearly things that you're not going to want to preserve here, that you're going to want to have taken off. So this can't be a standard preservation restriction, where you look at it and say, we want to preserve everything. Because there's probably most things have either been taken off, or you don't want to preserve anyway. I don't know if you can or want to do this, but I think it's important for you to make a site visit. Because you want to be very specific, whether it's you or the Board of Selectmen, and I'm sure you know, the future owner would be happy, knowing what are the expectations. You know, I think, as he said, the biggest thing you should look to preserve is the form of that structure and the structure itself. Beyond that, I mean, I don't know what the detailing is anymore. There are probably, you know, I'd heard that maybe there are some corbels or something along the frieze that maybe should be preserved, but, you know, I think some of the windows have been replaced, they're boarded up currently. There's the vinyl siding, I think the door has been removed. So, you know, however this works, you have to be very clear about, you know, what you want restricted versus, you know, how you might want to design this. Because let's say everything was gone. Well, it would be great if they, you know, use certain period details to rebuild the building. But that's different than restricting the building. The design guidelines you use and the materials you might use are a little bit different than, you know, working from a restriction. So before you even, the restriction actually, once you really look at the property, could be quite simple. I know that the selectmen even mentioned something like a facade restriction. You know, it sounds simple, but I don't even know if you just want the facade restriction either, because you don't know what the materials look, hopefully they're in good condition. You don't know what those materials look like under the vinyl siding.
And that's why every house is, it's tough to put a precedent or a standard to every single house. So when
here's
the
a,
time comes, we'll be able to
here's a
work with
question.
the
Does it
applicant.
make sense for us to do a meeting at 5 o'clock at the site on the 11th
That sounds
before
good.
we come here?
I would almost rather if we could do it earlier, but it does have to be posted, correct?
It does have to be
Yes.
posted as a meeting.
Well, you can do a site visit, not deliberate.
Yeah, we could do it
Right.
individually.
Oh,
Well, you don't
okay.
even have to do it, you can do it as a group, you just don't deliberate.
Yeah, we just don't discuss it, right?
Yeah, just go and
So
look.
let's just do that. I
just
could do
wonder-
anytime.
I wonder if this board will be able to not deliberate or not speak. I'm speaking
That's
for
true.
myself as well.
It would be nice to be there on site to actually talk about it. So if we could set a meeting, but I could do any time on the 11th, so.
I found the best way to do that in all seriousness,
Yes.
Mary, is to have your site visit close to your meeting, because you have all these thoughts running through your head.
Yeah,
You want to get to your meeting and discuss them in public.
Yeah,
okay.
it's probably just a quick 10-minute walk around. I mean, it's not, we don't need
Okay.
access inside, so.
Okay, and your suggestion, John, is then to not bother posting it, just,
I don't think, it's an exception to the,
okay,
you know, open meeting law, don't post it, but just don't deliberate.
Yeah, we've done that before.
all right.
If you
Brenda-
post it to the public's involved,
Right.
there's a liability issue, because the public can come if it's a
That's
public
true.
meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Duncan, you look like you
I have
wanted
a
to say
question
something.
for Ms. Redmond and for the board, kind of a analogy. Are you guys familiar with what they do in automobile world? It's called a resto mod.
Mm-hmm.
That was essentially you take an antique car, you liberate it from the old technology in the
Right.
frame, you turn it into a modern vehicle, then you put the, you know,
Right.
either restored original or kind of the original
Mm.
patinated
Right.
surface back on, and you have, but is there some language that allows an owner of historic property to work with that kind of mentality, like, but we want to have an old home, but we need to live in a new home? Is there some sort of language around that, you know, I think, because honestly, when that whole stretch, and that's what we're looking at, it's like almost nothing inside the paint.
Right.
almost,
Yeah.
You know, that some of these buildings are gonna be able to take.
Mm.
And do we want to like say, okay, that's it? I mean, it's a theoretical question, but, or hypothetical, and I don't know if there is a legal
Well, I think it's,
posture of it.
I think it's again a question when we look at some of these things and people want to use AZEC. And, you know,
Right.
we cringe at AZEC, but at the same time, I also look at it as a homeowner and I say, geez, at least I know it's not going to be termite ridden in 20 years and it has some benefits to it. So, you know, I do think
That's
We
a
need to
function
consider
of
it all.
seeing how much original there is.
Right.
So
Yep.
that's exactly the inverse of that, going, and that's also why you need to have that factual information
Yep.
before this is drafted.
okay,
Because you don't know how much there is to preserve.
Mhm.
Restriction might be more about the standards for restoring rather than they are preserving what's there. This is
Yep.
kind of boilerplate, and this is much more geared towards having a shining example of unaltered architecture
Yep.
that you're looking to preserve.
right, versus
And I don't
something
think
that's,
that's that building.
Yeah.
And
No.
then you have to pick and choose about, are we talking about the exterior, are you talking about the interior? I think it's much more about the exterior.
Oh, yeah, it's all, I don't want to be
There's
above
a
material.
provision in here that even though this isn't a statutory restriction that MHC is gonna sign on to, there's a provision in here that MHC has to respond because there are maybe archaeological concerns, which I just wouldn't have for this site. So make sure those things get
Okay.
struck.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Any other questions for people? Then we will, Patty, we'll put this on our May 11th. And then I think as a group, we can plan to meet, 5:15, 5:30 to give us
So-
some time to look.
May
Probably
11th. Yeah.
5,
And then still
if we can
get
do
here.
5, yeah.
Yeah, I think that would work just fine.
That's right, we're just looking, we can't talk, so.
And I will check in with administration to make sure that they know that's gonna happen. They will be on site. Next on our agenda is the proposed property study, Bob.
No new information there.
Okay, and any reports from commission members? I have not followed through on my piece of the pie.
Yeah.
I'll call sickness on that, so.
Nope.
Does anybody have any other comments?
Made these look better than I forgot to email them to you. Do you want them emailed or no?
Sure.
Okay.
Although this is beautiful the way it is, so.
Is there anything else that anybody wishes to discuss? Hearing no, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any in opposition? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you very much. Patty, could you turn us off, please?